Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Brother Mike one more time. Just coming to you with the next installment of our series on engaging a postmodern culture. Um, you may be wondering why I'm spending so much time talking about philosophy and the philosophy of the day. Um, well, the reason is that I want to help you kind of understand what the culture and the climate would have been that Paul was going into. We saw that there was much idolatry going on, but really, I wanted to look at what were some of the mindsets that Paul would have had to address in his message, and it may help you understand why he addressed it the way that he addressed it. I talked about a couple of different pre-Socratic philosophers that I'd want to look at just very briefly in this message. One man was the name Parmenides. Parmenides lived from about 520 BC to about 450 BC. Now, he had a view of reality that says that change is impossible. Basically, that existence is timeless, uniform, and unchanging. He believed that anything that existed could not have come into being because nothing comes from nothing. So he believed that existence was necessarily eternal. Um, he also argued that movement was impossible because it required moving into the void, which he identified as nothing. Therefore, movement cannot exist. In his view, that which existed was timeless, uniform, and unchanging. Change was only perceived, but not real. And on the flip side of Parmenides, you had a man named Heraclitus, who was from Ephesus. He lived from about 535 to 475 BC. He was known for the doctrine of change being central to the universe, or basically, and you may have heard this before, that everything that exists is in a state of flux. So everything was constantly changing. And one of his quotes was that change alone is unchanging. So we've heard this before, that everything is constantly changing, or as some people would have, everything is evolving. Something us in the Reformed tradition like to say is semper reformanda, which is mean we're always reforming. We're always becoming more reformed in our thoughts. He had a very interesting quote that says, "No man ever steps into the same river twice." And when I first read that, I didn't understand it because I said, well, why? How couldn't a man step into the same river twice? Here's a river here. I'm the same man. I'm going to go step into that river again. Simple. But his reasoning was this, and I found a longer quote. It says, "No man ever steps into the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man." Understanding that with a river, it's constantly changing. The current is moving things along the river. There may be erosion on the banks of the river. And so that river is not going to be the same river. Or the temperature may go up or down of the water. And you, as a human being, have gotten a few seconds older. So it's not quite the same river, not quite the same person. So it's very interesting. So you had these two men who were giants in Greek philosophy, who disagreed about things that were very, I guess, fundamental. One says change is impossible. The other said everything's always changing. So you had a conflict there. And I'm sure anyone following these two men, or those who were even slightly informed about the philosophy and the arguments going on, may have said, man, this is confusing. I don't know what to believe. And if these two men who are so brilliant, so wise, cannot come to an agreement and can argue about this, what is the hope for me? What is the hope for us who are unlearned to come to any sort of truth if these men can? So, and we see that it happens over and over again in Greek philosophy. Now, after Heraclitus and Parmenides, you had people like Socrates who brought a lot of good things to philosophy. He thought that if he could force people to think more deeply, then maybe they could give up some of their presuppositions. And of course, we talked about the Socratic method a bit in our last one. And you had people like Plato, who was a student of Socrates, and after that, Aristotle came after Plato. And then you had these Epicureans and these Stoics. They too disagreed. I'm going to read from John MacArthur's commentary about the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers. He says, Epicurean philosophy taught that the chief end of man was the avoidance of pain. Epicureans were materialists. They did not deny the existence of God, but they believed he did not become involved with the affairs of men. When a person died, they believed his body and soul disintegrated. Stoic philosophy taught self-mastery, that the goal in life was to reach a place of indifference to pleasure or pain. So Epicureans believed that the chief end of man was to avoid pain, and the Stoics said we're going to become indifferent to it. So here again, you have two different views of the same thing. And so we can see in the scriptures, in the passage, where it says that now all the Athenians and strangers visiting there used to spend their time in nothing other than telling or hearing something new. Why not? Why not hear something new? Why not hear some new teaching, some new doctrine? After all, if these men who we look up to cannot seem to agree, and everything seems pretty relative to what you think, what's the purpose of holding to one position and staying there? And so it's a very relativistic society that they were living in. It was a very your truth is your truth. You can believe what you want to believe type thing, and I don't think it's much different at all than what we see today in our culture. We live in a very pluralistic society. So I wanted to just talk about that for a minute, just to set up the rest of Paul's address to them, so that we would understand first what kind of culture was Paul going into, what kind of mindsets was he going to have to battle against. And I think that'll help us as we can apply this to our own situation and our own culture that we live in now, which is very relativistic as well. So in our next message, we'll go right back into Paul's message, and we'll deal with it as he starts to unpack some of their own arguments. All right, until then, God bless.